Let me go back to the announcement, sorry. Okay, we're recording this for those people who can't make it. It will be available for 30 days when put up. We are pinning the video, so only the presenter will be recorded. And we ask of you to not contact participants outside of the festival without their consent, as some people can feel really violated. So what we want to do instead is, if you want to ask for permission to talk to people, do this in the workshop, in the festival, during the breakout rooms, during the huddle. And for emotional support, you can email support@loveabilities.org. So we have Sue Newsome. She is a psychotherapist and actually is doing this very, very special session for us because of her years of experience in Tantra. We've asked her to present this very special session for us. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking and hand over this time to her.
Good afternoon, everyone. So the first thing I want to check, can you hear me? Can you just like put your hands up, put some thumbs up if you can all hear me? Okay, great. So first of all, a thank you to Martha and Michelle for the opportunity to participate in what feels like an absolutely groundbreaking event. You know, we're only day 2 and already it feels like there's a great momentum and some fantastic sharing going on. So I'm really delighted to be part of it. I've asked Martha if she can monitor the questions because I'd like to take questions at the end of our time today, because otherwise I'm going to get really distracted, and I'd like to just kind of stay focused. So I'll just get my PowerPoint up. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you today about Tantra. It's something that some of you may know about. It's something that some of you may have a curiosity about. Some of you may have already had experience of Tantra. Some of you may have wondering whether you want to. So hopefully, as part of this presentation, this session, that you'll leave with a better understanding. But more importantly, you'll leave with an experience, because the plan for the next hour and a half is that I share with you some practices that are founded in Tantra that you can have an experience of this afternoon and that you can take away and make them your own. You can adapt them, you can develop them so that they work for you. So my name's Sue Newsome and my business is called Sexual Confidence. And just to give you a little bit of background, so I'm actually in my second career. I spent 17 years traveling the world as an IT consultant, and then I've been working in the field of sex and relationships since 2001. So I guess you're wondering what made me swap computers for vibrators. Well, the answer to that is that it was my own personal journey. I was struggling with enjoying sex. I was struggling with intimacy, and I really knew that place of assuming that everyone else was having loads more sex than I was, that everyone else was better at sex than I was, and that everybody was enjoying it a lot more than I was. And I through doing some work for myself, I came across Tantra. And that was the start of a real revelation for me, and it's what inspired me to retrain for what's been my current career. So I started off training as a counsellor, as a psychotherapist. I then trained as a Tantra teacher. I've worked as a sexual surrogate, and then I trained as a sex and relationship therapist. And that's how I currently work as a sex and relationship therapist. I also do a lot of sex education. And I do expert witness work because people who have just listened to Michelle's presentation, I'm being asked more and more to comment on how people's sex life is being affected when they've had an accident or when they've suffered something like childbirth trauma, which I think is really great news. So in terms of my business, I offer private sessions to individuals and couples, and I do work with people with disability. And I also do events, so educational events that can have many different themes to either groups of members of the public, charities or organisations. But I want to just talk very briefly about how I specifically work with people with disability and how that came about. So it was back in 2009 when I was already working as a sex therapist. Well, no, it's before I became a sex therapist. So it was when I was working as a tantric practitioner and a sexual surrogate. Tuppy Owens from in the UK, from the Outsiders organisation, she contacted me and she asked me whether I would work with someone who had contacted her. And this was a guy who wanted to explore his sexuality. He wanted to explore the possibility of whether he could experience an orgasm or not. He'd had an accident which had created an injury of quite a high level in his spine, and I found my yes to that. So I started doing work with him, and that was, that was the start of me really exploring how I could work, how I could walk alongside people with disability and help them find their sexual expression, help them find a sense of sexual fulfillment and what they needed for that. So I then, following my work with that particular client, I then became a member of the Sexual Health and Disability Alliance in the UK, which is, for those of you that don't know about that, is a fantastic organisation for any professionals that have any responsibility with people with disability around friendship, intimacy and sexuality. We meet twice a year, and it's a really good sort of resource to draw on and get inspiration from. I was very honoured to be voted Sex Worker of the Year by the Outsiders charity, and also Sex Therapist of the Year. So I have two of those. If you've not seen them, at the Outsiders, the awards are these massive, big, wooden, golden penises. They're fantastic, and they've got penises with wings. So I have two of those. Not things that I can have on my mantelpiece in my living room, but they do take pride of place in my home, but just out of sight of some visitors. And I, in terms of my work with people with disability, I work with individuals and I work with couples, and yeah. So my plan for this session today is, first of all, let's explode some of the myths around Tantra. Let's try and take some of the mystery out of it. And I also want to be very realistic about, how Tantra is right now in the UK and how it is practiced and what to be aware of. I want to share with you some of what I think are the important aspects of the Tantric teachings that have really informed my work. And although I don't practice as a Tantra teacher anymore, I would say that Tantra informs a lot of what I do. And then as I said, we're going to do some practices as part of today's session that hopefully give you some very, very usable ideas to take away and things to consider. So let's just talk around, what is Tantra? So it's ancient. Yeah, it actually, Tantra predates most of the religions and the spiritual practices that we currently have in the Western world. So it started in India a long, long time ago. And it was actually, it was some people were rebelling, because those of you that know about the caste system, it was a group of Hindus who were completely rebelling against the people in the higher caste. They were the naughty ones, and they wanted to do, they wanted to set up something different, and they created their own set of teaching. And the Tantric teachings did influence, what is currently practiced as Hinduism, Buddhism, Sufism, and Taoism. So they have seeped their way, they found their way into some of these other spiritual teachings. I would say that as a general comment, Hindu Tantra is generally, the idea is that you practice with the other. So it's about, self and another. Whereas the Buddhist Tantra is very much around practicing with self. So it's much more of a solitary path, and the teachings are much more around self rather than about connecting with another. And the essence of Tantra, I mean, it's a massive topic, but I've just tried to sort of condense it and summarize it for you for today. I mean, the idea is that we as human beings, we have this capacity to build energy in our bodies, which is a sexual energy. You know, the energy that the source is that fire, that sexual fire that basically starts in our pelvis, and that we can, if we choose to, master that and use that physical experience to connect with the divine. So true devotees of the tantric path are using the expansion of their sexual energy to derive a higher level of consciousness, to enter into altered states, and to make that connection with spirit, and whatever that means to them. Another key point of that is that we've had people talk around the sort of the goal model of sex, the goal-oriented model of sex, which is it can keep our arousal as very much a genital experience, so it can keep it very compacted, very contracted in the body. The tantric principle is much more around, okay, how can we, this source of warmth, of this source of pleasure, if you like, how can we expand that throughout our body? And actually, how can we expand it beyond the physical body, so that we can actually get a sense of feeling more of ourselves through mastering and managing and working with our sexual arousal. There are many different sort of threads, if you like, or flavors of Tantra. Some of you may have heard of, people talk about the Cobra breath, which is the Babaji school of Tantra. There's an Ipsalu school of Tantra, which is an international school. The person who kind of brought Tantra out of India, who is credited with doing that, is someone, he's generally known as Osho. So that's a name you may have heard. And he in the 1960s, he decided, he set up a whole community in India, which was all about practicing his teachings, his view of Tantra. But it was those teachings, he brought them out of India, brought them over to the US and then to Europe. And I think they sort of formed the basis of the Tantra that was first established in the Western world. I mean, he's been criticized. There's all sorts of documentaries. He ended up with the real guru status, and I think he had something like 6 Rolls Royces and armies of people following him. But he certainly played a big part in, I think, translating the ancient texts and trying to make some sense of them, for our modern world, because the devotees of Tantra, the followers of the Tantric teachings, if they were in India, then they may well have been able to take themselves to a Tantric temple, to an ashram, and spend 3 months, 6 months there in a meditative state, not being distracted by their everyday. Well, the reality is, in the Western world, that's less possible for us. And he recognized that, and he what he said, which I think was quite interesting, is that when he came to the West, that the Western mind is very busy. He said that it's very difficult for Western people to actually move into this idea of this state, this altered states, because our focus is very much in the mind, and our mind is our distraction, so we are struggling to be in our body. So he actually developed a whole series of meditations, and the principle of them is to actually to get us out of the busyness of our mind and to drop into our body. Because he said that we weren't ready, we weren't in a position to just naturally step into his practices, and to connect with these altered states of consciousness. some of the pioneers who took the teachings, Osho's teachings, and again did further translation of them, if you like. I mean, Margot Anand, and her teachings are known as sky dancing. She certainly, in Europe, her teachings were the first Tantra schools that were opened. So she, you know, the sky dancing organizations were the first Tantra schools. And then there's people like Daniel Odier, Barbara Corellis. You know, these people have written books. They've done, you know, they've got the whole Tantra programs, very, very well known and very established teachers. And then more recently, you know, we've had a new wave of Tantra schools, and they're generally called Neo-Tantra. So this is that, you know, this has been the next wave of the Tantra teachings. I think the important thing to note here is that it's not regulated. So there's no, you know, there's no sort of governing body for Tantra. And so there's a whole variety of organizations offering Tantra. There's a whole variety of people offering Tantric services. I think that the important thing is that if it's something that you're interested in, you've got a fascination about, is that you really check in with what feels okay for you, what feels safe, what feels appropriate, because I think this is about using your own intuition and your own judgment. There are a lot of Tantric practitioners who are, you know, they provide Tantric services. They operate independently. Some of them are working as part of Tantra temples in different, you know, cities throughout Europe. A lot of sex workers have now added Tantra to their offerings, and some of them, you know, genuinely, you know, have been through some training and, you know, can offer that, you know, that type of service. Others, I think Tantra has become a little bit of a bandwagon. So I think you have to discern and be clear about what it is that you want. And certainly for in the UK, there is a website called TLC, which is developed by Tuppy's organisation. And on there, you have a directory of sex workers who are happy to work with people with disability and have some experience of that, and also some Tantra practitioners as well. So that's a good place to check. And I hope that, you know, other countries, other cities will have the same in place, because then at least you've got a chance that the people will be, you know, have some integrity in terms of what they're offering. So I think one of the fantasies about Tantra is that if you want to practice it, well, you've got to have Indian music playing in the background. You've probably got to have lots of candles lit. You probably, burn some incense. Make sure you're wearing sort of, you know, white flowing clothes. Then you have to be able to sit in this position. This position is called Yabyom. And that really, you know, to be, you know, to really do Tantra properly and to do Tantric lovemaking, then this is what you need to be able to do. Well, that's a load of rubbish, really. You don't need to be able to do that at all. And, you know, the other fantasy is that you've got to be able to chant Oms to each other and maybe have a little bit of red paint on your forehead. Yeah, I mean, you know, you can do that. That is one of your options to create beautiful sacred space for either for yourself or for yourself and another. But you don't have to do that. So for people who are, you know, true followers of the Tantric path, then yeah, they may take the time to set up the space and actually, you know, really follow Tantric ritual. But for others, it can be, well, let's just use what speaks to us from the teachings. Let's choose. Let's pick the bits that make some sense, that can potentially make a difference for us. So, you know, there's no right or wrong way to engage with Tantra. It's very much a personal choice, but it's a set of teachings that are available. And if you know, there are people who can offer support if it's something that you want to explore and have an experience of. So when I first came across Tantra, which, you know, now it's quite a long time ago, I was interested. Why are we fascinated with it? What's the excitement Tantra? Why is it taking off? Because when I first encountered it, you know, it's over 20 years ago now, and there were only a couple of Tantra schools in the UK, but there was just the beginning of that wave of interest. And I've pondered this, you know, in all the years since then, and I've pondered my own fascination with Tantra. And so I'm just going to share with you what I came up with. And I think the key thing is that, you know, Tantra it's openly and unapologetic about its teachings around sex, and it acknowledges that as human beings, we are sexual beings. So there's none of this, you know, about sex being a taboo. There's none of the embarrassment or the that inhibition about talking about sex. It's a very open acknowledgement. We're sexual beings. We have the capacity to experience arousal in very different ways. And how may we use that in our lives? How can we be in a choiceful situation around that? So I think that's one of our key fascinations, because, you know, my experience in this country, and I listening to Mitchell yesterday about the US, you know, we're absolutely hopeless, beyond hopeless, around educating and giving people what they need to understand and know about having sexual pleasure. You know, it's crazy that in this day and age that we are still in that, you know, that situation where we struggle to educate our young people around sexual pleasure. We struggle to educate them around intimacy. But that's where we are. I think another thing about Tantra is that it's not all about, you know, that model of penetration and fucking. It presents, it kind of like broadens the horizons in terms of what's possible in terms of intimacy between consenting adults. You know, it starts to open our eyes that, yes, of course, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that model of you know, having a fuck, having penetration, but there are other ways that we can engage with ourselves and with others. And that, you know, that sex can be about connection. And I say this because it's actually, first and foremost, it's about connection with ourselves. That's actually the most important connection we make, well before we even consider making a connection with anybody else. That actually, you know, to engage in a sexual experience with ourselves, that is about feeling connected in whatever way we can, you know, connecting with our physical body, connecting with our emotional self, and potentially spiritual as well. And that it can be a spiritual experience. So, you know, I often get asked by people, it's like, well, isn't there more to this? You know, it is often, you know, it's like, well, I have a sexual response, but I just think that there's more. I'm just scratching the surface, and that actually, and you know, that spiritual experience is a very personal thing. It means different things to different people. Of course, in this country, you know, that famous quote by Sting, I mean, it was a long, long time ago now, but he, you know, he boasted, I think it was either on TV or radio, that he was a follower of tantric sex. He engaged in tantric sex with his wife, and that he'd had sex for 8 hours. I mean, yeah, a load of rubbish, because he then, you know, much, much later confessed that, well, he was in a sexual space for 8 hours, but, you know, he had his dinner and he watched a movie. But, you know, that I think that stoked people's interest, particularly people who felt that, you know, potentially he'd had managed to sustain an erection for that amount of time, which he confessed that he didn't. So that's some of my musings about why we're fascinated with Tantra and why it has become increasingly popular in this country. My own personal experience with Tantra, I would just briefly share this, is that many years ago, I was doing a personal development workshop, and I met a woman who completely inspired me. You know, I saw this woman and she's just so sexually confident, and I just thought, I want some of that. And I found out that she was doing Tantra. So that sparked my interest. So I did some research, and I found out about an introduction to Tantra. It was an evening event. At that stage, I did have a partner, and I asked my partner, a male partner, would he come along? And he was, not sure about that. So I had to phone up and ask them to make sure there was no inappropriate nudity how typically British, and they reassured me there wasn't. So we went along to this introductory evening, and we decided that we'd be really cool and we wouldn't work as a couple. We'd be on our own and get the full experience of it. And I had a dreadful time. It was awful. I was working with this particular person who just wanted to just rub his very, very hard erection into the small of my back for most of the practices, which I really struggled with. But what it taught me was how crap I was around boundaries. You know, how I struggled to really, hold myself and articulate what was okay and what was not okay. So that was my first introduction, which was not positive. But there was still something in it for me, and so I persisted, and I did further, and then it really opened my eyes, and I then went on to train as a Tantra teacher, and then started to co-run a Tantra school in the UK. And for me, if I was to summarize what the outcomes have been around my involvement and my study and practice of Tantra, I think first and foremost, it just showed me, it was like it was shining a light on all the things that limited my pleasure, my sexual pleasure. So my beliefs about myself, what I'd grown up with, things that had occurred in my teenage years, all those things that were just crowding in and that were really, keeping me small around being a sexually confident woman. I started to actually inhabit, live in my body as opposed to being detached from it, and started to really accept it as potentially it is safe to have this body, this female body. It potentially is okay, and actually, if it's safe, well then it's a place where I can experience pleasure, and it's my body can be a resource to me in my life. And this was I didn't want to accept this one initially, but actually, it really dawned on me that no one else is responsible for my pleasure other than me. If I want to be in sexual pleasure, if I want to explore my pleasure, then that's my responsibility. I cannot hold anyone else responsible, nor can I blame them. So, I had to grow up really, and actually, be my own authority about what I liked, what I didn't like, what I desired, what I didn't want. So yeah, that one, that took me a little while, but I think I got there reasonably well. And then that experience with Tantra from a personal development perspective totally inspired me to retrain for my second career, which I'm still very much enjoying. Okay, so I think that's enough of me. So that was to basically give some context and some a bit of background, and hopefully to give you some useful information. What I'd like to do now is to invite you to join me in a practice. So I've included a set of practices in this session today, and the idea of these is to give you sort of a flavour of some of the practices, some tantric practices. They're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Some of them will speak to you more than others. So it's an invitation, and be with it in whatever way you want to be with it. Yeah, and if you enjoy it, great. And if you don't, well, then that's that it's that particular practice is not for you. All of these practices are solo practices, so they're all practices that we can engage in for ourselves and with ourselves. Obviously, there is the possibility for people who have partners or who have, buddies that they share intimacy with, that you can then introduce the practices to your partners or your pleasure buddies. So that's one option. So my invitation is, so however you are right now, if you can just maneuver yourself so you can get comfortable. So whether you're sitting, whether you're laying down, whatever position you're in, just make any adjustments that you need to make to get yourself comfortable. And then when you've done that, my invitation is to close your eyes. And in the act of closing your eyes, really take your attention inside. So taking your attention to yourself. and letting go, just for a short time, letting go of all that you're aware of in your external environment. So everything that's, you know, around you in the place that you are, but also everything that's, you know, beyond the place that you are, that's through this online connection. So just letting that go so that you can just be very much with yourself. And however you are, so whether you're sitting or you're laying down, whatever part of your body you can feel, just, you know, just feeling that, just noticing that connection between that part of your body, and whether it's your bed or it's a chair, or if you're leaning against a wall. So just feeling that connection, feeling the holding of you in your chair or your bed. And then taking your attention to your spine. So either feeling that part of your body or imagining that part of your body. And you may want to use your breath to actually, you know, imagine that you could breathe into your spine. And letting your focus go to the lowest point of your spine. So whether you can feel that place or you can imagine that place. And when you've got your focus to that lowest point, then imagining that you can grow roots out of the bottom part of your spine. And these are your roots. This is an extension of your being. And these roots, they emerge from the bottom of your spine and they travel down. They can either go straight out of your body, or if you want them to travel down your legs, you can choose. But they have a downward motion. So as you're imagining these roots, you're actually letting them travel downwards. They're seeking, they're searching, they're moving down. They move down through the earth now. So they're beyond you, but they're your roots. And they're reaching down and deep. They're moving down deeply through all the layers of the earth, through matter, through the different rocks that make up this planet. They are just digging deep, because where they want to go, what they're looking for, is that red hot molten liquid that sits at the center of the earth. They're really seeking out the fire, the red fire. This red fire of passion, of desire. This red fire that is so alive and so vibrant. It's not out of control, it burns brightly. And when you dip your roots into this molten red, you feel the excitement of the redness, of that flame, of that warmth, of that heat. And you allow the roots to dip in so that they can soak up the red fire. And then you imagine that you can bring some of this red, sexy fire, you can bring it back up your roots, so allowing it to travel back through these tendrils. The pull is now back to yourself. You want this fire. You've dipped into it and now you want some of it for yourself. So pulling it back to yourself, bringing it up. It's getting closer to you, and now you bring it up through the soles of your feet, or up straight into your body. Let it travel up, and imagine that you can hold some of this red fire inside you. You can let it You can let it caress around your sex, around your pelvis, and then bringing some of that red fire, that sexy hot red fire, just letting it sit in your heart space. So imagine it as a red flame that's really vibrant, it's really alive, and it sits there in your heart space. And now my invitation is that you take your attention to the highest point of your spine. And whether you can feel that part of your body, or if you can imagine that part within you. And when you've reached that place with your attention, imagining that you have branches that can grow up out of the top of your spine. And these branches, they have a desire to reach upwards. They want to be up and out. So you let them travel out of the top of your head. You let them travel beyond your height, your stature. And these branches, they're eager to reach out into that vast expanse, that openness that is above and beyond, that is way up, higher than we are. And as these branches reach up and out, they start to dip into the whiteness, this white space that has infinite possibility. This space that has no limits, no barriers, that is light, that is airy. It glimmers. Its whiteness has that silvery glimmer to it. So imagine these branches that are yours. They want to feel this. They want a taste of what it's like to feel free in this openness. And as you've reached out, as your branches have reached out into the whiteness, and they've soaked up some of this silvery white light, this white fire, then bringing that back to yourself, bringing this whiteness, the white light, the white fire, bringing it back down your branches, bringing it back into your body, into your being. And allowing that to travel down so it can, the white flame, the white fire of infinite possibility can sit next to the red flame of your passion. And if you can, maybe putting your hands over your heart space, or imagine your hands going there. And breathing into this space that's in you that holds your red fire, your sexy hot red fire, and that also holds your white flame of spirit. And breathing into the possibility that being sexual is part of your human right, and that can have possibility for you. That we don't have to separate out sex and spirit. That we can hold them both together within our human self. So really breathing into your heart space and just noticing what this practice has given you, if anything. Just noticing for yourself if any particular images or messages came out for you. And then when you're ready, opening your eyes and bringing yourself back into your into your space, into the now. So maybe with your hand just touching, you know, your chair or your wall or your seat, or with your feet, if you can, just, you know, a little wiggle of your toes to really bring you back into the present. And this is where I wish that we were all in the same place and we could talk about how it all was for us and I could hear from you, but we're not. And I find myself wanting to know how it was, but I will let go of that need and I'll move
Susan.
on. Hello?
Hi, it's Mitch without a camera.
Oh, hi, Mitch.
Hi, I want to say that it's the first time I made a connection between the Christian concept of hell and the fiery molten center of the earth being something that's hot and sexual. And the sky is a heaven. So it's like heaven and hell connection. I never really connected the two because I'm not Christian and I don't think of hell, but I'm like, oh, the center of the earth is this molten, hot, sexy thing. And, you know, hell is this fiery thing, place you go to burn. And that's where the devil is. And I'm like, oh, wow. So anyway, thank you.
No, thanks, Mitch. And I think for me, when I first encountered this practice, it was like, well, for me, sex was dangerous. You know, that red molten place, it felt dangerous. You know, to really be in my sexual truth didn't feel a safe place for me. So it was suddenly opening up the possibility that actually it doesn't have to be a scary place.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Martha, can I just ask, are there any, like, people's got any serious questions that do you feel need answering right now?
Yeah, somebody just messaged interesting talk and relaxing meditation. That's it so far, really.
Okay, okay. So
did you want them to put their comments in the chat box?
Sorry?
Did you want them to put their comments in the chat box?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So those of you who want to, you can do that.
Thank you. So now I want to talk about some of the tantric concepts that I feel have been particularly powerful in my work, well, both personally and professionally, but particularly professionally, the ones that I feel have really informed my work. And I think the first one is that the goal is pleasure. So again, this fits in with a lot of what we heard yesterday, particularly from Mitch, that it's not about this linear idea of that the only way that we can be sexual is to, we start off and everything's focused and we're trying to desperately bring it to this climax, this crescendo, that actually we can be in choice. I mean, we've not necessarily got the capacity to experience climax in that way, but that doesn't preclude us from really enjoying pleasure in a very full way. So that the biggest consideration is, where is this pleasurable? Where is the pleasure? How can I enjoy the pleasure? And that there are so many different ways of attaining pleasure. There are so many different opportunities, and it's very personal. So it's unique to every one of us, and it changes. So what we liked last week doesn't mean that we're going to want the same again this week. And that there's no blueprint about what is good pleasure or what's appropriate, good sexual behavior, provided no one is being harmed and we're adult and consenting, then, we can derive our pleasure in a myriad of different ways. And I think that's something that's really, really, powerful around tantric teachings, that it can happen across the whole body. We're completely obsessed with the genitals, that is the solitary sexual organ in the human body. Well, that's just, again, we heard yesterday that that's just not the case. And, it isn't the case, that it can happen across you know, a lot of the human body. And that what we're doing is, it's about, you know, creating a sensation. So creating something that has a pleasurable impact for us. And then rather than tensing into that experience and continuing that tension, so that we're then, you know, we're starting to really drive towards the performance goal. It's actually, the secret here is, okay, let's create a sensation, let's build some arousal. And then what about if we relaxed into that? So what about if we've started to really, you know, generate some really gorgeous tingly feelings, and actually, whoa, let's relax and see what happens there. So instead of us going for this sort of like this peak towards this pinnacle, what about if we looked at something that was much more like a wave? And you know, that again is quite significant. And that if we have this capacity to build sexual pleasure in our bodies, why keep it small? Why not look at how we can expand that as much as possible? So the keys are, you know, breath, sound and movement, and I will talk about them a little bit more later on. So it's how to make it as big as or as expansive as we want it to be. But I think the important point here is about choice, that we, you know, for us to be able to choose how we attain our pleasure. Okay, so this brings us on to practice number 2. So this practice is, we're actually now going to start to move into making contact with ourselves. So the first practice was taking you on a bit of a visualization, a visual journey. And now this is about actually making contact with our physical body. So my invitation is for you to close your eyes. So wherever you're sitting, wherever you're laying, close your eyes. And in the act of closing your eyes, you're taking your attention to yourself and trying to let go of any distracting external factors. And to be aware of your body, and then to be realistic about a place on your body that you can relatively easily make contact with, so that you can touch. And if that feels difficult right now, then imagine that you can touch that part of your body. And it can be anywhere, but somewhere that's easy. That's not that's easeful, that's you can do it comfortably. And when you've decided where that place is, the first thing is to, if you're actually going to touch it, well then to move your hand to that place and place your hand on that part of your body. If you're imagining this, so imagine that you're moving your hand to that part of your body. And to just hold your hand there. And to let your attention be with the hand that is going to do the touching. So the hand that you've moved to this part of your body, that is just resting there, is still and is resting. And asking that hand, how does this feel? How does it feel to be touching this part of my body? It may not be your whole hand that you're using. It may just be part of your hand. It may be a finger. But letting your focus be in the hand that you've moved to do the touching. And really listening to what that hand has to say. You know, does it feel okay? Is it indifferent? Does it feel warm? Does it feel hard, soft, squidgy? If you're doing it through clothes, so you might be through fabric, there might be a texture of the fabric. But at the moment you're holding it still, you're just getting a sense of. So at the moment you're being in the place of the giving the touch. Maybe the hand's starting to ache a little bit and it needs to adjust to get comfortable. It doesn't feel comfortable. And then switching your attention to the part of your body that is being touched. So wherever that is, moving your focus to that part of your body and noticing, how does it feel to be touched right now? And if you're not actually doing the touching, you're imagining this. So imagining, how would it feel to be that part of my body to be touched right now? Does it feel comforting? Does it feel interesting? Does it feel heavy? Does it feel a bit constricting? Does it feel nothing? So just noticing how that part of your body responds. And then asking that part of your body, so what does it want? How does it want to be touched? Because so far there's just been stillness, there's just been contact. So would that part of your body like some movement? Would it like some type of stroking? Would it like some light movement of your fingers? Would it like a bit of a gentle squeeze? Would it like a bit of you know, with your finger ends, more of a sort of a movement of your fingernails and more of a scratching? And when your other hand starts doing that, then asking the part of your body that's being touched, well, how is this? Is it all right? Or do you want to change it? Is it pleasurable? Because this is about pleasure. If it's not pleasurable, what might make it pleasurable? If it's just okay, is there anything that would make it better? Is there anything that would improve it? So does it need to be slower? Does it need to be harder, softer? So just exploring that for a short period of time. You've got your hand doing the touching on a part of your body, and it's actually just noticing, what does that feel like for the part of your body that you're touching or you're imagining you're touching? And exploring, giving different instructions or making changes or adjustments to the hand that's doing the touching. And then just gently moving your hands away, either physically moving it away or in your imagination. And opening your eyes, bringing yourself back into your space. And just noticing how that was. Because what we were doing there is we were actually exploring that inner dialogue, if you like, between the giver and the receiver. Because when we are being sexual with ourselves, then that's something that it's important that we develop, rather than just automatically doing something out of habit and not really listening to our body about whether this is okay or not. And it's really key that we can develop that for ourselves, because if we are then going to engage with someone else, be that, you know, a partner, a friend, or a sex worker, a surrogate, it is so imperative that we can actually listen to our bodies, and then we can actually articulate and speak about, you know, what's okay, what's not okay, rather than the risk of being done to, or the risk of just surviving something or enduring it, because that's, you know, that's not good for anybody. So that practice we just did, that was very much around, you know, just taking a moment, very simple contact, but just really being aware of there's part of you doing the giving, which is the hand that's doing the touching, and then there's a part of you that's receiving that touch, and have those working as in communication with each other. Okay, any questions? I've got, oops. I just noticed I've not got my, the chat's not available on my PowerPoint. No worries. So I'm going to move on to talk about the idea of what called pleasure map, or in Michelle's talk this morning, she referred to this idea of body mapping. And why this is really key is it moves us out of the very, very narrow and limited belief that there are only certain places on our body where we can build erotic excitement that can be pleasurable. And so we, you know, people use the phrase erogenous zones. That's when people talk about erogenous zones, generally they're talking about the primary zones, but there's a secondary set of secondary zones, and there's a third group of erogenous zones. I think the important thing here is that we're not even limited to what's in these zones. I mean, anywhere on the human body it has the potential for pleasure. So it could be a pleasure hotspot. And I think it's really important that we're interested and curious about where our pleasure hotspots are. And then when we find them, we don't think, oh, well, that's it, you know, that's now cast in stone for the rest of our lives. That we're open to the possibility that this is going to change and develop, and you know, that we're going to develop new places as we become more and more confident and connected to our bodies. So I'm just going to go through these because I think it is, you know, in my work with clients, people find it incredibly useful to understand where these places are. And this is all based on, it's actually based on sort of Taoist teachings, which have kind of, as I say, have been mixed up with the Tantra, because it's all about where the energy channels are in the body. So although we may be touching one of these particular places, that can have a significant impact in other areas of the body. So the primaries are lips, nipples, and genitals. So we're all very, very aware of those. Then if we move on to the secondary zones, we've got the outside edge of the earlobe, we've got the nape of the neck, we've got what's called the sacral lumbar junction, which is kind of like, it's the line, it comes from the outside of the hip. It's like a way, if you're wearing a G-string, a thong, you trace from one hip going down the crease in between the buttocks and then on the other side. There's the gluteal fold, which is the line underneath the buttocks. So again, you go from the outside edge of the hip, you trace the line under the buttock towards the perineum, and then you do it on the other side. The inside of the thighs, from the knee going all the way up to the perineum, and then the back of the knees. What's really important when we're exploring these, or, you know, I mean, some of them we can, if we have that capacity, we can explore some of these for ourselves. But if we are, you know, requesting that it's a partner or you know, it's a professional that's helping us explore these places, because these are potentially more sensitive place on the bodies, we have to use quite a precise touch. So, I mean, if I was to just show you, you know, if I just do that on my ear, well, all I'm doing is I'm just rubbing my ear. I mean, and that's all I'm feeling, that I'm getting my ear rubbed. If I want to explore the real, if you like, erotic potential of this part of my body, I've got to be using one or two fingers, and I've got to stroke really, really slowly and quite precisely down that part of my body. Now, if I can't do that with my hands, I could potentially use a toy or use some implement to do that. So you can use the fingers, you can use the tongue. So if someone is doing this for you, you can request that they use their tongue, because, you know, we can be very, very precise how we use our tongue, because it's got, you know, it's a muscle in the body, and you can trace, like you're tracing a line on the body. Or you can use the breath, so you can blow. Because if you use that breath, the cool breath, you can again be quite precise. So these are the secondary erogenous zones. And then there's a third group of erogenous zones. So it's the outside edge of the little finger moving down. There's the palm of the hand. So that's a clockwise circular stroke on the palm of the hand. There's the navel. Now, it's not digging in the navel. as if it was a little pot. It's actually just stroking the top edge of the navel as it sits on the abdomen. There's the outside of the anal opening, packed full of nerve endings. There's the nostril, so the bottom end of the nostril. There's the actual ear orifice, so that's more not doing anything dangerous in the ear, but just circling inside the this outer chamber of the ear. Soles of the feet and the big toe. So any of you who know what it's like to have your big toe sucked, you'll understand the erotic potential there. What's really important, there's an intelligence behind this. I'm very happy to make it available. There's a structured ritual you can go through where you start off on the secondary zones, and you can access all of those from the back of the body. You then move on to the primary zones, but you don't get distracted there. You just keep the continuum going and then move on to the tertiary zones. And what you're doing through that process is you are really waking up the whole body to the possibility of pleasure. And I think what's important there is that this thing about the primary zones where we normally get very distracted and we get very performance-based, is we're treating them in the same way as all the other places in the body. And that can be a very beautiful experience. The reality is they're not all going to work for us. As I've already said, it's very personal. So some of them, there might be nothing there, and it may be a part of your body that you don't have a lot of feeling anyway. Or there may be some of these where it's hypersensitive and you just want it, it's too much. But it's definitely worth exploring if you can organize this for yourselves. And because I'm quite down to earth, and somebody told me about this and I was like, there's no way I'm going to enjoy somebody stroking bottom half of my nostril. But when I experienced it, it was like someone was making love to me. It was because I'd been through the sequence. It was incredible. If you dive straight into these tertiary zones without waking up the rest of the body, it's just going to feel really odd. So it is about doing it as a sequence. So those are places that have that potential for a bit of heightened sensation. So that leads me on to the next practice. So I'll just give you a moment to adjust yourselves, get yourselves comfortable. Maybe take a few deep breaths. Feeling into your body and how it is right now. Just relaxing your shoulders, softening your body. And closing your eyes so that you can be paying attention to yourself. And in this next practice, where we're going to explore a primary erogenous zone, we're going to explore the lips. So we can either do this with our finger, if that's possible, or we can try and do it with our tongue. If neither of those feel okay right now, then using your creative imagination to imagine that either you are doing it or someone is doing it for you. So the invitation is to bring our focus to our face and just consciously, just really try and relax the muscles in our face, and particularly our jaw. So to have a relaxed jaw, we need to have our mouth slightly open. The jaw is a place where we typically hold a lot of tension. It's where we stifle. We can often stifle our sexual arousal by clenching our jaw. So just softening the jaw, having your mouth slightly open. And then either using your finger or your tongue and tracing a line. So tracing your top lip, starting in the corner and moving your tongue or your finger over the outside of your lip. Doing this really slowly so that you can feel it. If you do it quickly, then it will be just a very fleeting, very quick experience. But to actually get an experience of the real pleasure potential here, we have to do this quite slowly and quite precisely. So whether you're using your tongue or your finger or your imaginary finger, just stroking. And it's the line where your lip joins your face. That is the most sensitive place. And if any of you are struggling with what I'm describing, if you want to open your eyes, because I'm just show you on the video, I'm doing it with my finger. And then I'll do it with my tongue. And then either using your finger or your tongue, tracing the line over your bottom lip, so your lower lip. And the closer you can get to the line where your lip joins your face, the more the sensation. And then if you use your tongue to caress the roof of your mouth. So stroking behind your teeth and just slowly letting your tongue, and it really is like a caress motion, the roof of your mouth, and just see how it feels, noticing how it is for you. And then relaxing your finger, relaxing your tongue, opening your eyes, bringing yourself back into your space. So welcome back. And moving on to the next piece, which is all around creating sensation. And when we think about creating sensation, we generally think about touch. But I think sometimes we have to be creative around that, because we might not have full capacity to touch in the way that we would like to be able to. So it's about how can we create impact, and what level, what degree of impact does our body want? The different places in our body, what type of touch contact do I want? So, the obvious one is the hands and the fingers, and it's about, using them in whatever way we can to the extent that we can, but then not being limited by that. So actually starting to get creative around implements. And I think it's very definitely worthwhile exploring soft sensual touch. Sensuality is a gateway to pleasure. And if we've been deprived of touch, or if the touch that we've received has been of a real sort of functional nature, then it can be an amazing experience to create an opportunity to experience really soft, gentle touch. I mean, people talk about tantric touch. Or conscious touch, and again, that was Mitch showed that in one of the videos yesterday, and that's a really great experience. And that's where you can use you can use fabrics. You've got the good old feathers, all those sorts of things that you can create sensation with, as well as the hands, or instead of the hands. But I do think that there's something else around, sometimes, our bodies, yeah, soft touch can be great because that can allow us to relax, but sometimes we do want more impact. And if you've got places on the body that need more impact for you to get sensation, then, let's not be apologetic about that. Let's actually, let's request it. And that's where you can get, again, very creative with, okay, so what's going to give me that more sense of impact, that more intense sensation? Do I want to, good old pinwheels? They can be amazing. And I know we've got some more talks later about kink and, things like, if this is the sort of thing that my body needs, well then, let me request that. Let me create a situation where I can ask for that. And then our favorites, clothes pegs. They are just amazing for creating impact, creating more intense pleasure. So it's about being creative. How can you manage the level of impact that you desire? Can you use it with fabrics? Because I think this is something I've come across with clients. It's about being inventive for people who are spending a lot of time resting against cushions or head pillows. What about having different fabrics available for those special moments when you really want to have a sensual experience? So what about some velvet? What about some silk? Or what about something that's a bit more rough? Something like these fellas, the loofahs, or I found that as well, the balls that physios use. That can be great for behind the knees. So there's lots of possibilities there, and I think it's about you becoming the custodian of your pleasure and requesting what it is you want, and actually using your furniture to help you in that. Is there some way that you can organize furniture so that you can create the impact and get the touch that you want? So I'm going to move on to the final section, which is about expanding. So if we can create sensation in the body, what do we do to actually expand it, make it more? Well, breath. Again, that was covered yesterday, and hopefully you've got an understanding of that to a certain extent. So there is, just the practice of bringing consciousness to our breath. I mean, it's phenomenal what a difference that can make, because when we start to get aroused, that's when we lose that consciousness, and we will naturally breathe faster. But if we can actually bring our attention to our breath, and to actually combine our breath with what we're doing with our pelvic floor muscles, then we are talking about all sorts of lovely possibilities. And I know we've got a session on Kegels coming up. Sound. Well, we're not supposed to make a sound, a noise, are we, when we're having a nice time? But it's really important that we keep from our pelvis, from our genitals, all the way up through the top of the head. There's a very significant energy channel. And if we are keeping our mouth closed, we're clenching our jaw, we've got our shoulders hunched, we're blocking that. That's, we're really limiting the extent that our arousal can expand. So sound is really important. Now, I know that it's not always appropriate, or it's not always okay for us to make sound in our home environments, but it is something to think about. One of the things I have done, and that's worked really well, is just put a very thin piece of silk over my face, so that I could just I could hear my breath moving, and I could feel it moving against the silk when I was in a situation where I couldn't make a noise. Because I'd grown up with the idea that, nice girls don't make a noise when they're being sexual. That's proper naughty behavior. And movement, now we're not talking significant movement here. It's just because we do get into muscular tension when we get aroused. And then the risk is that we get stuck in that. And that's just then going to drive us into this tense experience. If we can, use that combination of breath and relaxation and softening the body and just a little bit of a wriggle, then that can make a difference, so that we experience our pleasure in a more expanded way. And let's be creative. Food. sensual food, you know, if you have someone feed you some mango and, you know, have it slapped all over your face, or just savor it as it goes down your throat. So it's, yeah, lots of possibilities there. So that brings us on to the final practice, and this is one where we're just going to explore this idea of sound and how it can make a difference. So what my invitation is that you actually unmute yourselves. So put your, Martha, can you do that for everybody? So that you can be heard.
Oh, okay, sorry, I cannot. I don't know how.
Okay, so everybody's, this is the invitation, is that you take yourself off mute so that we can actually get, we can try and connect for this next practice. And the invitation is to make physical contact with yourself, or imagine that you're doing that. Imagine that someone else is making physical contact with you. And, you know, so you might, and you know, you've got permission here. You know, if you want to stroke, if you want to massage, caress your nipples, if you want to stroke your genitals, do it. If you want to lick your lips some more, do that as well. So yeah, come on, this is a chance to go for it. You've been listening to people talk today. So come on, and as you do it, just be aware of your breath. So just be aware of that breath, and let a sound come out on your just, you know, how much has this part of your body been wanting a bit of time? Goodness. Let's see if we can make it. Yes. Yes. So let's see if we can make a bit more of a yes, and we can get permission from everybody. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. This is our yes to our pleasure. It's our yes to our right to enjoy our bodies. It's about feeling that yes. Hearing that yes from your body. Yes, Thomas?
I have the right to say and do what I think, given that, you know, my circumstances. I'm in a workplace environment here as well as my own.
So taking good care of yourselves, doing whatever is right for you right now. So making that choice for yourself. So it can be in your imagination. And just, and yeah, it feels pleasurable, giving yourself permission to smile.
Hold on a minute. No, that.
I can feel, I can hear a nice growl happening there.
So,
and it could be a giggle, a laugh, a howl.
So,
yes, Thomas.
Would you? I can feel my appendage growing, but I am stuck with a wheelchair table in front of me.
Oh dear.
Any advice?
Well, can you ask for a table to be removed?
I can if I find the woman again.
Okay.
Bear with me.
Okay, so I feel the yeses have subsided. So if you'd like to...
No, they haven't. I'm just stuck in one of those prisons again. Hold on a minute. Liz, can you do me a favour? Can you get rid of this tray and pommel for me?
Why?
Because Sue wants me to. And I want to.
Wow, has it come out?
So I'm just going to move on because I'm conscious of time. And what I wanted to offer was this idea of you having a date with the most important person in your life. And what I mean by that is having an agreement with yourself that you are going to have some time where you can explore your pleasure, and that you organize your resources and to request this. And I know that's not always straightforward. I know that can be sometimes problematic, but it's about wanting this for yourself enough and actually starting to communicate and articulate what it is you need so that you can, in whatever way, explore your possibilities of pleasure. So what do you need for your environment? What do you need in terms of privacy and support for that? And what do you need in terms of resources? So what items, what is it you're interested in potentially exploring? And I think the most important thing about this is that it's about having compassion with ourselves. So going into this, it's about, having sort of booking some time, having a clear intention that actually, well, tonight or this afternoon or tomorrow morning, I'm going to have some self-discovery time. I'm going to have some time that's about me exploring, either, using fantasy, using physical touch, using implements. I'm going to have some time, a bit of self-discovery, a bit of an adventure with yourself, but with letting go of any agenda, letting go of any goals other than I want to find out where my pleasure is. So that's a great thing to do, and it's a great practice to actually, prioritize this and have this as part of your self-care. Before I finish, I just want to I want to honor the person that actually I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. So this was the guy who wanted to explore whether he had orgasmic potential, and he contacted Tuppy and said, look, I want someone to work with, and him and I started working together. So he was 43-year-old and he'd had an accident which had left him with his spinal cord injury, such that it was C2, C3, and he used a ventilator to breathe. And he'd heard some of the research in the US that had been done around men with spinal cord injury and their capacity for orgasm. And he'd spent, after his accident, he spent nearly 2 years in rehabilitation, and nobody mentioned sex once. So obviously we're going back quite a few years now, and I know things have improved, but during his time, no one, talked to him about sex because he had been fully sexual prior to his accident. And it was causing him mental health problems because he was really struggling with depressive episodes around the lack of acknowledgement. And he really stood up for himself, and he had to negotiate with his family situation, with his carers, to actually take that step to say, look, I'm not prepared to resign myself to a life, the rest of my life, which does not include sexual pleasure and does not include the possibility of intimacy. Him and I embarked on a program of working together, and the most important thing we had to start with was communication, so that he was in control. So he was responsible for his pleasure and was clearly communicating with me. And that we explored all sorts of different types of impact and physical touch, particularly around the level of his injury and all around his head, face, neck, shoulders. And we developed something called a multisensory experience, and he did manage to experience orgasm. And we were invited to present this to the Royal Society of Medicine in London, which was a very special moment. And I just want to honour him because, his courage in reaching out for his own sexual needs was a massive inspiration to me and to all of you. Just being part of this festival is that, you're interested, you're curious about,
And it will
pleasure.
change.
Can there be more pleasure? And I just, to acknowledge your courage. No, it's not easy to ask for support or ask for input around our sexuality. It can be quite a tricky thing to do. So yeah, just to acknowledge that. So thank you for listening. Thank you for participating. And I'm really happy. We've only got 5 minutes, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And I'm very happy to take questions as part of private message or email after today. I'll just end my slide.
Okay, there are questions.
Okay, thanks, Martha.
Baya.
Okay, there are questions. I find it difficult to close my mind to the outside world and thoughts. Are there any tips on how to focus?
Okay, so thanks for that. I think that generally that's a struggle for all of us, because so I think it's unrealistic to expect we can completely close out the outside world. It is a practice. I think the more we try to do it, then we can develop it. And I think the important thing is, don't imagine that you're going to be able to do it for prolonged periods of time. Just focusing on your breath. That's one of the key elements to this, because that gives our mind something to think about. And then as soon as we notice that our mind's taken us off somewhere else, then we can bring ourselves back. So it's like a dance between being present and in our body, and then the mind wants to take us away. So we bring ourselves back.
Okay, another one. I think that part of the problem is that I have areas of pain because of spinal injury. My thoughts keeps going to those areas. So that's like part 2 of the same person. Oh,
is it? Okay. So I wonder if whoever this person, sorry, I don't know exactly who it is. I'd like to. I wonder if you could, if that's what's happening, if there's a possibility of you finding some places that don't have intense pain, so you can let your mind go there. So to develop. And this again might be part of a great adventure to develop. Okay, so you know where the pain is. You're really knowledgeable about that. But let's actually now find some places where there could be some pleasure, and that's where that could indulge your mind in those.
Okay, so another question. I'd like to ask about books that are practices for individuals and partners to start off with more Tantra practices.
Okay, so what I'm really happy to do, I've got a book list, and I'll put that up on the Facebook group.
Yes, you can do that, and also I'll put it out under resources.
Yeah.
Okay, next, somebody's asking, can the exercise that involves touch any part of your body be extended to other parts of body?
Absolutely, that can be, yeah, absolutely. You can touch anywhere. It's your body. It's your domain, your realm.
Okay, another question. Sacral lumbar junction, is number 3 one of the chakra region?
So the sacral lumbar junction, that is, it's because the sacral chakra is around that area. Yes, it is. Yeah. So that will fit in with this. It will be the second chakra rather than the third chakra.
Okay. So the rest are just comments. One says, I felt ultra feminine. Another said, nice to feel the common experience of growing branches, which none of us have regardless of function and body. And one person says, it's a bit long. The hell comment was really interesting for me as a Christian faith person. Tom
Hello, Roger.
Makes hell and Lucifer hot.
At the door, if you can open the door by the car park at the back for me.
Okay, bye-bye.
And Lucifer hot in a good way. I like Lucifer and Christ both as a bright morning star. As an autistic paraplegic, I 80% don't want anyone anywhere near my body, even my care team. Doing all of this meditation for me is erotic, but I'm doing it not with my body, but also sea and surf and sand and planets and sunsets.
Okay.
Okay, that's all.
That's great. Okay.
Okay, another question in the box. Is there any particular chakra we should focus on with a partner to enhance pleasure?
A good question. I think I think what's interesting with the chakras is, so the base chakra, which is the root chakra, heart chakra, and then the third eye. So that, particularly in Tantra, those are the key points of connection when we are entering into a tantric ritual with another. So we're connecting at sex, heart, and spirit. So those are the three. And that position, that yabyum, the tantric lovemaking position, well, you can improvise that. You can do that sitting on chairs. You can do it laying down next to each other. You don't have to be in that very ritualized position. But the idea of it is that you're connecting sex, heart, and third eye.
Yes, so that's everything that we have, and it's time. So anybody who would like to contact Sue, as you can see and hear and feel, she has a lot of experience around Tantra, and you can get in touch with her through her website. And I'm going to read it out. It's www.suenewsome.com. That's SUENEWSOME. So I'm so happy that we got you. I think the best person to get for a session like this is somebody who's not trying to sell Tantra. Yeah.
No, I'm not selling Tantra, I'm selling pleasure.
Yeah. Okay,
That's
so
our
somebody
birthright.
private message. Thanks for that today. Very good. Very good, very good. Yeah.
Well, remember the yes.
Good,
Come on,
yeah.
yes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Martha.
Okay, I stopped.